Well, good evening. I am County Executive Stuart Pittman, and this is Tuesday night with County Executive Stuart Pittman from Anne Arundel County. And our topic tonight is COVID support programs. And I have with me two of my favorite people, two of the people who I seem to participate in Zoom meetings with just about all day long, every day. Our Chief of Staff for Anne Arundel County, Dr. Kay Bodgester-Brown, and our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Health and Human Services, Pam Jordan. So this is going to be a little bit different from some of the ones that we've done, because the three of us are really just going to talk about the experience from day one of COVID, of attempting to create as good of a safety net as we could possibly create for the people being impacted the most by the pandemic. And the focus is mostly the health and human services programs, as opposed to the work in the health department to stop the spread of the virus. And we're just going to tell some war stories. And the reason that I want to do this is that I think a lot of people don't really, until you're on the inside in government, you don't really, you don't get to see how the work is done and how the programs get created. And during this time, since the middle of March, when our schools were shut down, our senior centers were closed, and we really started to take this pandemic seriously, government had to figure out a new way of operating and operating quickly. And so it's a really fascinating story in how government functions. If anybody, I'm sure lots of people will write about it in the future. And I feel as though the way it's happened in Anne Arundel County has been pretty extraordinary. But I do want to say that we're still nowhere near out of the woods on this. And not only do we have increasing case rates right now, the fall surge that people projected as people moved indoors with colder weather seems to have started in our county and in our state and across the country, northern hemisphere of the world, really. And fortunately, we know a lot more about the virus than we did when it started. But the economic impacts are also nowhere near over. We're still, we still don't know when the eviction moratoria that are in place end at the end of this year, just how bad it's going to be. The loss of work is actually, we've had unemployment filings increase just in the last couple of weeks. It's still not a pretty picture. The CARES Act money from the federal government all has to be spent by the end of the year. And so far, Congress has not been able to come up with a plan to even continue unemployment insurance, much less any kind of assistance for states and counties and local governments to be able to address needs. So, but there's a good side to all this, which is the incredible work that's been done and the programs that have been started in Anne Arundel County. We have no intention of ending these programs. So I want to get into some of that with our two guests who have been at my side throughout this. Although when we started back in March, they were not in the jobs that they're in now. So Kay, Dr. Kay here, our other Dr. Kay Bodgester-Brown, was the Deputy CAO for Health and Human Services. We have two deputies under the CAO in the county, new positions. One is land use and one is all of Health and Human Services, which is a pretty huge area of work. So Kay was in that position. And when the pandemic started, since she was a superstar, we said, okay, you're in charge, Kay, of all of our coronavirus response. and you took over, but within a few weeks you had to go for surgery, right?
Yeah, I did.
You had a back problem. Are you feeling better?
Yeah, it was better. It was good to get that taken care of because it was a lift. So I was ready for it.
Yeah. It was a terrible time to have to go recuperate from back surgery. And I know that you were told by your doctor not to be working. And I think as soon as you awoke from being put under you or back on your laptop in your hospital bed or maybe in your own bed, answering emails. So your absence didn't last long, but we temporarily also put Matt Power in charge while you were gone. And then when you came back, the two of you started to tag team the operation, and you were so good at it that it wasn't long before I decided that you should be our chief of staff and Matt should be our chief administrative officer, because you made government work in ways that I know it had never worked in this county before, at levels of efficiency it had never worked before, which meant that when you moved up to chief of staff, we had to fill the deputy CAO position for Health and Human Services, and you were not about to let that go vacant for long. And we needed somebody who knew how these departments of government operated. And another superstar from the pandemic response, the person who was running the Department of Aging and Disabilities, and we'll get into some of the incredible work that you did there in response to the pandemic. But we were lucky enough that Pam Jordan was willing to move over to our office. So congratulations and welcome, Pam.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's been awesome to lift up some of these programs in a broader capacity. So thank you for the opportunity. And I had a great mentor. So, and they're inspired me quite a bit. So thank you, Dr. K.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you're here with us doing this work. I know that I remember the day, Mr. County Executive, when you had the conversation with me and I said, well, who's going to do Health and Human Services? and I was a little worried about that. That was a moment. So I
think I probably said something like, can't you do both jobs? We don't have a lot of money floating around right now.
Well, it's kind of funny because you did ask me to sit down first. And so I was glad that you did that because, yeah, it was a little bit of a shock. But yeah, you understood what the importance was and we worked to create, a system that works. And we were able to bring Pam along. And the great thing about Pam coming along is that she was already working with us on so many other programming. I'll just talk a little bit about my experience when we started with planning the COVID response and really getting well into the response. One of the incredible things that the directors who came together just really, it was just like something came out of them and they came out of their shells, they came out of their departments and what was their traditional programs and really began to think about, how do we work with this situation that no one thought of before. No one thought of, how do we provide these types of services when you're being in the same space is an issue. So Pam was involved in many of the programs that weren't even, they were, a part of aging, they were a part of our individuals with disabilities, but they were broader than that because we were trying to make sure that we had programming that crossed all of the county, all of our different populations that were going to need services. And she was right there next to me. Anything I asked, she would say, yep, I'll help you with that. And didn't bat an eye, didn't push back. But she was right there. So I say that to say that when she came on board, it was a pretty easy, it's as far as easy can go, transition to get up to speed and take over and, be able to pick up and keep that work moving forward.
Yeah, so in aging, all the senior centers were closed at the same time that schools were closed by the governor, right? Middle of March. And so you all had to figure out, you were pretty worried about what was going to happen to these folks who depended on their senior centers, not only for a good hot meal every day, but also for some social connection. So what did you guys do, Pam, over at Aging?
So first of all, it's a great question, but I want to just say that the Department of Aging and Disability staff seamlessly transitioned with the help of OIT. Everybody's cell phone or everybody's desk phone was transitioned to a cell phone or to your voicemail came in on your computer. I just have to tell you that I'm so proud of how quickly it was really seamless to the public, I think. But back to your question. So So we were worried because there were about 600 older adults that depended on a hot meal 5 days a week at our senior centers. They could no longer come in for that. And the socialization piece. So over, gosh, we must have 13, 14,000 members in our senior centers that really enjoy to come. These are active adults. They enjoy coming in to play pool, do yoga, pickleball. We even have belly dancing classes. Yeah, we do. South County, I'm telling you. So we have
I gotta send
creative.
I gotta send my mom to Edgewater for the belly dancing classes.
Please do that.
She-
Yes.
Yeah, I won't give her age publicly, but she'd probably get a kick out of that
Yeah, it's really cool
when you reopen. Yeah.
when we reopen. So a couple of things happened right away. So our last day in the senior centers was Thursday, the 12th, I believe. Yep, the 12th. And by Friday, we had seamlessly figured out a way to start feeding seniors their a hot meal. So we partnered with our great partners up in Baltimore, Meals on Wheels of Central Maryland. They immediately ramped up and we started handing out boxes with 7 meals and snacks and milk and juices at the senior centers. And that program grew from we had about 600 participants to more than 2,000. And what is really cool about that is it exposed our programs to people that never knew about us before. So there was kind of a silver lining in there with being able to feed people and help them stay isolated, but get good, nutritious food. I'll get to the piece about socialization in a minute because I'm so proud of this. I could just keep talking about it, but we had the police.
Well, I just have to say that I remember going down to the Edgewater Senior Center and you were
Yes.
handing out these boxes that had 7 days of meals in them. And they were,
Yeah.
pre-prepared meals where you just stick them in the microwave or whatever. And then you also were giving flowers away that had been donated.
Yeah.
And people were just so happy. And you
They
had
were very
police
happy.
officers and all kinds of staff from county government helping with the distribution. And I was really impressed.
We did. We had the police cadets who were out of class temporarily. We had sheriff's cadets, Office of Transportation. So we also started purchasing fresh fruits and vegetables from farmers and layering those in with the pre-prepared meals. And at the same time, we launched a program called Rovers, Remote Online Virtual Education Resources. And that was actually named by Suzanne Kowiak, the director of our South County Senior Center. And that's an online virtual senior center program that has been on the air every day since I think the third week of March. So every afternoon you can tune in around 5.
Oh, every day. Wow. So it's new programming every day.
New programming. So yeah, that was the big lift in the first few days.
Wow. And then, the other thing that really impressed me, I remember we were staffing, we opened the Office of Emergency Management in Glen Burnie, and all departments were sending staff into the call center to take calls. Remember, people were pretty terrified at that point. We were actually working to line up hotels and other large facilities where we could send people who needed to quarantine and isolate in very large numbers. The fear was that we were planning for the worst. But you all, so while we had people going into the call center taking calls from people who had a lot of questions about COVID, you all were actually making phone calls to every single senior whose number you had. How often?
Every day. We had 10. Yeah, so we didn't reach all 10,000 every day, but we identified about 10,000 older adults and people with disabilities and caregivers known to the Department of Aging and Disabilities. We split that list up among everyone in the staff. It's a staff of about 130 at the department, but we also had Office of Law, Recs and Parks, DSS, fire department staff who helped us with those lists, Office of Information Technology. Again, it really just brought the best out in people who wanted to help. And it was a well check, and it was done at the pace the individual wanted. So sometimes they wanted to chat every day. And socialization, without socialization, there can be some really poor health outcomes. So it was it was a really nice thing for everybody to pitch in and do. And it kept people, gave them something to look forward to for the people that were more isolated.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing, and that's still going on. And like Fresh Food Fresh Food Friday, and some of the other things you've done a great job, or Aging has done a great job of getting volunteers to come in from other departments of county government to help out. And I know you did the COVID Health Corps. You put that together when you came into this job, when the Department of Health said that they really needed to staff up quickly because they set a goal. I remember they set a goal of going from 1% to 2% of our total population being tested every single week. And we all kind of thought that it's impossible. You know, Dr. Kalyanaraman said we were going to get here by a certain date. And they knew that they didn't have the staffing for it. So you, in your position as deputy CAO, you put out a call and you called it COVID Health Corps to get county employees from all over government to go and help the health department with testing.
It was that was a very cool program and a big lift. One of the best we got participation from our libraries. So keep in mind that we had staff that was on administrative leave because some of their functions can only be done in the office. And what was really rewarding about the program is that those individuals were able to contribute in a meaningful way. So we brought library staff in. We had school crossing guards who work for the police department who wanted to contribute, but there were no children to cross, help cross the roads. So they joined in and helped with Operation COVID Health Corps and may possibly even be still working with them. And lots of response from county agencies. It served a purpose, and all of our county employees want to contribute in a meaningful way, and that worked out really well.
So Kay, it wasn't the very beginning. It took a while before the federal government came up with the CARES Act. And we had already moved on transferring money for things like eviction prevention program. We were the first county in the state to do that. And we used some of our casino revenue for that. But when the CARES money came along, $100 million, significant money to be able to respond to this pandemic. You became a part of a group in county government that would review proposals from the different departments for new programs and decide whether to fund them. So can you talk about how that worked and how those decisions get made?
Right. So yeah, we pulled together representatives from the county executive's office and budget and finance and the health department. And one of the very first things that we had to do is really understand the guidelines and what was required of us and these funds and how we could use them. And there was a huge learning curve in that. It was pretty flexible, but everyone was a little bit afraid because we didn't want to spend the money in a way that wasn't going to stand up to any type of audits and that aligned with what the instructions were. So we spent a lot of time looking at that, and then we researched what some other jurisdictions were doing just in terms of models and how we might look at how we were going to spend the money. And we came up with a model and looked at kind of things in thirds. So we had kind of like the human service response. We had health response. Oh, I'm sorry, health and human services. Then we had like a government type response that was our government operations. And then we had businesses and other types of
PPE spending was
and PPE was in a couple of different categories. It wasn't we didn't stay true to the model, but we used it just to kind of better understand how we could work with the money. Our first programs, really the funding was spent to really begin to fund our responses to the humanitarian crisis that people were experiencing. We knew that we had to very quickly begin to fund programs that would help our individuals who were either unsheltered, have somewhere that they could safely be sheltered and distanced. We knew that most of our shelters were kind of built on a model where people are a little bit more close. And so we had to spread people apart. And so we had to put them, some of them in places where, they were able to socially distance. The health department was awesome in that they worked with, I think any nonprofit that raised their hand, gave them a call and said, hey, we want to provide services, but we want to do it safely. How do we do that? So they helped us, and we really worked through, you know, how to look at these funds in a way that was going to help us deliver to ease some of the challenges that people were feeling. We worked closely with the food banks, Anne Arundel County Food Bank and the Maryland Food Bank, and kind of sorted through what their processes were and how best we could work with them to be able to supplement the work that they were doing. We worked with,
let's talk more about food. I know
okay,
you're going to go through everything, and I'm going to stop you.
okay,
Let's talk about food because I mean, people were losing jobs quickly.
yeah,
When the shutdown happened, everything but essential businesses were closed and people were laid off. Some people were able to get unemployment insurance fairly quickly. Other people not so lucky. The system was slow, and the lines at food distribution were really long. And we still have, I mean, 500 people drive up for Fresh Food Friday. A lot of churches and organizations, some of whom had been doing food distribution already, and then they ramped up their operations. I remember when we first got a map up online of all the food distribution sites, and then we got a hotline. So either of you say something about food distribution and the map, the hotline, how that all came together.
So I'll talk a little bit about it, and Pam, you can jump in. But
Yeah.
that was a fun time. We worked closely with the food banks so that we could make sure that we were supporting them with the funding that they needed to be able to support the community organizations that operated the pantries and the pop-up pantries. You know, I just want to take a moment to mention that, you know, government was fully present and operating during this time and continues to do so. But I'll be honest, we could not do this work without our partners in the community. Our nonprofit partners, our faith-based organizations and other community organizations, volunteers. I mean, they showed up in ways that, you know, still kind of gives me goosebumps because they were front and center. What can we do to help? How can we supplement with whatever it is that you need? And that's critical to our service delivery because they know their communities with which they work. So we worked with them, we got them funded. And I'll go back to the CARES piece. Part of the other challenge we had to work through is that we had to be able to get money to these nonprofits so that they could go ahead and do that work. And Arundel Community Development Services helped us to fund many of the programs that provided services. So we worked really close with them. We bought food boxes so that we had emergency boxes. So on the weekends or other times when it was in the middle of the night, if someone needed something and we weren't able to get food at a church or one of the distribution sites, they could call and they could get a box. As we were working through that, one of the comments that we got a lot was that, well, they're turning people away because they didn't have enough food for the distribution. And some people just didn't know where to go get food. And so I remember it was probably really late one night, probably around 8 o'clock, and I was still working, and Pam and I were talking about probably something related to services. And I said, Pam, I just need for people to be able to call somewhere and figure it out, because apparently what was on the internet maybe didn't work for everybody. So let me back up. The Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families helped to develop this list of all of the pantries and resources that were in the county. They monitor this list on a daily basis. And so they send it out to all the service providers. And we said, okay, look, this is great. Let's get it on the website. So we worked with IT. We set up an entire system. So it's on the website. You can go and you can click on where you live and you can figure out what it is that you might. So if you're looking for diapers, there's a way to see that. If you're just looking for food, there's a way to see that. And it's updated on a daily basis. But I back up and I'm saying, but we still have people that don't know how to get food. And Pam says, well, let's do a food line. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like so simple, let's do a food line. And we had no idea how we were going to do it, but we worked through, the logistics of it, and the aging staff, she pulled in and said, can you help us deliver, figure out how we do this? And I'm going to hand it off to her to talk about, because I wasn't involved in all of the details of it. But I will say that they brought it to life, and it is amazing. So Pam.
Well, thank you. I think it was actually the other way around that you said, why don't we do a food line? And I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. And actually, it's one of the initiatives I'm most proud of. And this didn't even take any CARES Act funding. It was just an expansion of the good work of Department of Aging and Disabilities. And we have DS people on the call line. Linda Dennis pulls this together every day for me. But we have some, a great, we have one, well, let me back up about the phone number. So I said, wouldn't it be great if we had a phone number that was just 222 food? So I dial 3663 sitting at the desk, and it went nowhere. And I called Rick Napolitano at OIT. I'm like, I need this phone number, 222 food. So we got the food line to be so simple. One of the coolest things about when you,
And it's still there, right? So people can call it 410-222, which is the prefix for all county office numbers, food.
Food. So I'm looking at the dashboard from today. We got 21 calls today. The call takers and the case managers though are trained to, they're informed about all the COVID programs going on. So sometimes it's not even about food, and we'll connect you to the right resource. But I think besides all the good work that's being done on that, it taught us to be more flexible and be more responsive to people that don't speak English as their first language, because we brought in a company and, I'm not even going to try to say, please hold for an interpreter, because you'll make fun of me, Mr. Pittman. But
no, you did this once. You, in many different languages, you learned how to answer the phone once you found out what language and be able to transfer them to the interpreter. So let's give us 3 or 4 languages.
All right. Espere por interprete, por favor.
The words are good. The accent, I don't know,
All right. Well, I'm Scottish, I guess, so I did my best. But we trained all the call takers to say, please hold for an interpreter in a couple different languages. We were able to comfortably put, and we're still doing it, put the caller on hold and bring on an interpreter to help finish the call so that we could connect them with resources. We did have a little bit of trouble with the Korean language with please hold for an interpreter, but we're trying. So
yeah.
And that was all done with existing resources.
You know what?
So
the other thing that we used the food line for is that we knew we had some people who were homebound and that they were not able to go out to go grocery shopping and had needs that many at that time, the grocery stores were they didn't have the same products, they were running out. And that line also helped us reach individuals who needed those types of supports. And we had programming that we put in place that would actually go shopping and pick them up and deliver for them. So that was a really unique service that we were able to offer to our seniors and others who weren't able to go anywhere.
So so the whole food distribution thing was huge. And when you think about, I saw a chart that I think the Washington Post put out, some charts of the recession caused by COVID compared to previous recessions, the last 4 in the United States. And they showed for each wage level, how likely people were to lose their jobs in those recessions. And in this recession, people at the bottom quarter of the wage levels, and these would be service sector employees, these are people who work in restaurants and movie theaters, things that have been closed to a large degree, and the first to be let go, because management they usually hang on to, 8 times, you're 8 times more likely to lose your job if you're in the bottom wage sector, the bottom 25%. Whereas the people at the top, stock market's done pretty well during this recession, and people who work higher paid management jobs are more likely to be allowed to work from home and keep their jobs. And so the pain has been felt where people can least afford that pain, what we call the Alice population, the folks who miss a couple paychecks and they can't pay their rent and they lose their homes. We're talking about really serious crises in families during this pandemic, whether or not they've been infected. Now, the people who've been infected, of course, have an even worse time of it. And I do have to give a lot of kudos to our health department because they did set up contact tracing for everyone from day one. No other county in Maryland did it. And I think almost very few jurisdictions in the whole country did it. They wrote about this in the national press that Anne Arundel County was one of the few. And we not only did call everybody who tested positive and help them figure out how to quarantine and isolate, but we did what we call case management with every single one of them. And which meant that there were families where nobody was working because of this, and nobody had food, nobody had anything. And so we set them up with services. And I know that's an area where we're going to even increase the amount of work that we do in that area. But I mean, that's the level of crisis that we're talking about here, where these services are being provided.
And Mr. Pittman, let me also just expand on that a little bit. That you know, when the health department contact tracers would reach out and work with the families and individual and do their job in that, they would do these assessments and figure out what their needs were, and then they would work with the other departments to wrap those services around them. So you know, if someone was not able, a family member was not able to go out, or there are other children involved, they would make sure that food delivery was there. They would make sure that they had other items that they might need because they can't go to the store. I'm remembering an email that I got one day of a family that was a rather large family, and they said this family doesn't have anything. And we reached out to the HHS Continuum, and I think the partnership actually, they took care of it that day. They took items to that family that same day and made sure that they had what they needed to hold them tight until we could follow up with them and provide some other services to help them out. Additionally, if families were not able to isolate safely in their homes because maybe they had other individuals that were either high risk, we would help them with placing them in an isolation or quarantine hotel room until they were safe to go home, and that would protect their family. So, you know, it's a pretty incredible process when you really think about the work that's done to try and keep the families safe once they get sick and support them.
So related to that is really the thing that we cannot allow to have happen. There are two things that, you know, in my position, and I think for both of you as well, come first. One is we got to make sure people are fed, and the other is they got to be housed. Yeah. And so when the finances get to the point where you can't pay your rent or your mortgage, that's when people potentially can be put out on the street. Now, there've been a complicated set of eviction moratoria. There's the state moratoria, then there was CDC. Now there's a CDC moratorium that you can't evict people, but they have to be able to show in court that they shouldn't be evicted and that they meet the guidelines of the moratorium. So one of the things that I was most proud of is that our Anne Arundel Community Development Services, Kathleen Koch and her staff, came to me. I think they came to me before I even went to them about eviction concerns and said, "We got a plan, Stuart." And they took some of the federal money that they had, and then they went straight to our LDC, Local Development Corporation, that makes recommendations on spending of our casino revenue. We get some local from the casino, Live Casino. We get some money that goes to the county. They put money into education at the state level. But if you have a casino in your jurisdiction, it's a good thing. You get some extra assistance. And so they put in money so that we'd have $1 million to get started. And this was before CARES. And then when CARES came, we put another couple $1 million in. And what that meant was that we not only had money to pay the rent to the landlord,
Mhm.
but we had counselors to work with those tenants who were in trouble to connect them with other services and help negotiate with the landlords. And then the most recent thing, Operation Eviction Intervention, I was reminded today. Who wants to say something about what that was?
Pam, I'll let
That was
you.
that was the icing on the cake most recently to me.
So absolutely, so Arundel Community Development Services was already doing eviction prevention, but then we were able to bring in an amazing team of people, some are even bilingual, to help advocate for tenants and to even represent them in court. One of those advocates, pretty well-known individual, Lisa Sorrow, came from Legal Aid, and she's doing a great job, she and her legal team, of representing people that need a little help. The courts are hearing cases, but evictions, but nobody's evicted until the moratoria, as you stated, are lifted. But I would just say the message there is work with the Arundel Community Development Services. If you get a court notice, call them. You do need to go to court. But let us help you with the outcome. But yeah, having that legal team come in, that was brilliant on Kathy's part. And they've done a great job advocating for people.
And once again, that wasn't just government. That when we did that press announcement a few weeks ago about this new initiative, this new intervention program, it was, yes, we hired on Lisa Sorrow, who's going to work with our counselors, make sure the negotiations are done well and represent. But we also partnered with, I think, 3 different nonprofit organizations that all provide legal assistance to people. True. And so we're directly, we're supporting them for that. And then, okay, here's another one. I was very concerned, particularly about folks who weren't able to get unemployment insurance for various reasons. And so I had heard that other jurisdictions had done something like this. And the program, we're calling it Excluded Worker Humanitarian Fund. Kay, tell us something about how that came to be and what it is.
Sure. We worked with the Anne Arundel County Workforce Development Corporation to develop a program where we could offer cash cards of $500 to individuals who did not receive unemployment. And this was an unusual and different program for them. So it took a big lift with Kirk Murray and his team to, get off the ground and get going. So when we initially started the project, it was designed for people who had not been able to receive unemployment for a variety of reasons and had lost employment due to COVID. And we found that a lot of individuals had gone back to work. And so by the time we got the program up and going, the county had started to loosen up restrictions a little bit, and a lot of people were working. So we worked with him to really navigate some different programming that would still serve people who had a loss in wages, but expanded, the criteria a bit so that they were able to serve more people.
Yeah. So that is still evolving, right, Pam?
Yes, it is. So should be this week. We're going to open it up to more people, as Dr. Kay said. So anybody who's lost income, including lost wages, making less than $25 an hour, and wages do include tips. And we've gotten a lot of feedback, especially from ACDS, that tips, I think people would be really surprised about how much tips mean to people. So as we've evolved into a new way of receiving our services and our food, don't forget to tip people. That was really a big part of their income.
That's a good message. Thanks for adding that.
Could I jump in on that? I just want to also say that that program is, it's near and dear to our hearts because, you can go to a pantry to get food, and, you can get help with your rental assistance, or, to help with eviction prevention. And, there's even, you can go to the health department to get certain services, but there's really no place for you to really get cash if you're not able to get unemployment. And so, some of our residents have gone a really long time before they had money to just be able to go shopping to get some of the, you can get food stamps, you can get SNAP, but you can't buy toilet paper with SNAP. But toilet paper was kind of hard to find, but that's a different story. Bad example. But the point is that it was, we were really, really excited and really wanted to make that, have that program serve as many people as possible. And, that's why we're really committed to helping to help people who maybe didn't meet all the criteria, but that we're going to move it along. Because if you didn't work for a period of time, you're still probably struggling, even though you might be back to work now.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and I remember hearing from somebody who used to work at FEMA that during after a disaster like a hurricane, FEMA would come in, with housing assistance and food and all of those things, but also with cash cards for people. Mm-hmm. And I'm surprised more jurisdictions aren't doing cash cards for people as a result of this pandemic. Okay, there's another area that we've responded in, and most people think of this as economic development or business assistance, but business assistance really is people assistance. And one of the programs that I'm the most proud of was run through our Economic Development Corporation, and we called it, and I've got to say, this came from meeting with businesses about what they needed most. They needed not only to be open, but they needed to give potential customers the confidence to come in to their store or their restaurant and shop by knowing that they weren't spreading COVID, that they were being careful. And so what we came up with was the Customer and Employee Protection Program, where we gave grants to the businesses to be able to reopen safely, to be able to, whether it was computers for people to work at home, or in some cases, I think even vehicle to be able to deliver food, but plexiglass and in some cases, those ultraviolet lights that kill germs, whatever it was that would make it safer for them to reopen. So that program, I think it was 3 million, or was it 5 million? It was at least 3 million that went out, and that money got out quickly and really efficiently. And then we went back to economic development and said, there's another industry that really is hurting, that we can't afford to let these businesses die, because the families are going to be depending on them, especially when school reopens and people are back to work. So who wants to tell us about that?
Yeah. Got it. Oh yeah.
Hey, before you start, Pam, for some of the folks that are watching us, I just want to make a comment that, we're talking about these programs now, but for the most part, these programs have been underway. We've been tweaking them and making them better. There's a number of them that are new, but we've been doing many of these services for the full time of that we've been dealing with the pandemic. So I just kind of wanted to lift that up, that, we didn't wait until October to start, our programming. And when we had a plan together, that we built the plane while we were flying it, and we got services and things out to the folks who needed it the most.
And part of our challenge is to make sure that people know about these programs, because this is ongoing. We're talking about this whole thing as though it's history, but it ain't history, unfortunately. No. And so all of it is at aacounty.org/coronavirus. Mm-hmm. And if you go there, you can, hopefully everything's on there, and you can find the different things that we're talking about. But this industry that is so important and already been struggling, Pam, is?
Yeah, the childcare industry.
You betcha.
So imagine you're a home provider or a larger commercial center and the pandemic hits and you don't have any business anymore. Now we're out and about a little bit more and people, parents need that service. So this grant is intended to lift up the childcare industry. It's on a sliding scale based on the number of children you're licensed for. So we have your home providers, which are your neighborhood licensed providers, and your moderately sized commercial providers and your larger ones. So this is direct funding to your business for income you have lost and to help you with PPE, sanitization. The other thing that's going on now is if you have school-age children in your childcare center, at a minimum, you're helping them get online every day to do their schoolwork. So it can also be used to help you get students online and to do their schoolwork in a virtual setting. So that is out there right now. I would encourage any childcare provider who hasn't already applied to do so. I know we just buttoned up the agreement and I think money is on its way out right now to everybody. So please apply for that and help support the childcare industry. We need you. We need you.
Yeah. So we need to keep those businesses operating, and it's only been on the street for 2 weeks, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know that money is going fast, and we want to serve every childcare center and in-home childcare operation as well that we can to be able to keep them running. So as you can see, we have a lot of programs. We have some that another industry that you're going to be hearing about from us soon is the restaurant industry, which has been hurting, and we've got some programs forthcoming for them. There was also Rec and Parks, though. I remember back the very first town hall thing that I did with Dr. Kalyanaraman. We were talking about how during the pandemic there was a stay-at-home order. Remember? But we were encouraging people to go outside for their mental health, their physical health. It was springtime, enjoy the outdoors. And somebody on Facebook put a comment that we should make our regional parks where we have park fees free so that people can all go and enjoy it without having to pay anything. And I think a couple other people commented. I got down off of the podium at the end of the thing. It was a 1-hour thing. And somebody from my staff walked up and said, so are you okay with making the parks free? Huh? Somebody suggested it on Facebook, and the head of Rec and Parks has been talking to her staff, and they've been all talking, and they've got a plan together already. This was, by the end of the hour. And I said, yeah, sounds good to me. And as a result, our regional parks were made open and available to everybody. The park attendance increased by, I think, 30% over previous years. And our Rec and Parks team has been amazing during this pandemic in providing a place for people to enjoy outdoors and nature. And then in addition to that, there's the donations that we were calling for donations of supplies for people early on. And we opened a big warehouse for people to do that, but that was just one location. And then our parks came up with the brilliant idea of what?
Putting pods in the park. So that
pods in the park.
So they put these big pods in the park where people could come and donate items that they wanted to donate, food and other goods. And we had it at 4 different parks, in addition to being able to accept donations at the warehouse. And it's my understanding that was a hit. The communities really gave a great deal of commodities to those pods, and that really helped us out a great deal.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we found is that people, you mentioned this when you were talking about the nonprofits and the food distribution, that people have been looking for ways to help from the beginning. And so we have to make sure that there are ways for people to plug in and do that. And that was one of the ways that was possible. I also have to mention on the food distribution work that Feed Anne Arundel was an organization that came together sort of organically. Somebody who ran a restaurant got together with Anne Arundel Connecting Together, which is a church-based grassroots organizing group, and came up with this plan to restaurants that were closed to be able to provide the meals and buy them in bulk, and then give out prepared meals on the streets. And so that was one of our first grants that we gave out, was to Feed Anne Arundel to expand that work. So that was a really great one too. What other ones am I missing? What anything else, or have we covered it all?
Well, I just want to say, we talk about these programs like they just came together really well, and they did. But in the background, imagine, so we're shutting down government. We have employees having to do all of this from their kitchen table while they are introduced to a new system back in March where they're trying to teach their children virtually. And I want to give a shout out to the library who came and assisted county employees and the public, because they have all these virtual tutoring programs, and they were just a godsend to county employees who, in the middle of putting together a food access warm line or an eviction prevention program, also had their children at home, this brand new virtual experience. So, we talk confidently about this program, but I just think it's important for the public to know that the county employees behind the scenes were doing many, many things from their kitchen table to make this work in a whole new environment. And shout out to the library for.
And I have to say about the libraries, they were very eager to get opened again and provide services. They were providing services while they were closed, but so they stepped out ahead of all of the other counties in the state, and they opened, and they really tried hard to enforce the mask regulations and the distancing regulations. They got a lot of pushback. They had some infections. It was really difficult on the staff. They ended up deciding that they were gonna only be open by appointment only, which is the situation now. So you can call if you need to go to the library, and they'll let you in. But you're right. They just keep coming up with programming and ways to get around the restrictions of this virus, and in a good way to provide services. And that's true of just about every department. What else are we missing, Kay?
I just, just to reiterate how flexible and adaptable the departments have been. We've talked a lot about the Health and Human Service agencies. We have to thank our public safety professionals who, throughout this pandemic have done, great jobs with helping to educate the community on wearing masks and the importance of being too close together and congregating and, kind of separating. And then our firefighters and EMS, that they've been supporting individuals that are sick and just, their daily work, just going about it, being in contact. They didn't get the ability to stay home, but they showed up every day to do their jobs. And then, our internal government departments and offices, I can't say enough about how well they helped. We don't often talk about, IT, we don't talk about procurement, we don't always talk about finance and budget and the law, law office and personnel, but they are integral to the work that we do. Without them, we would not have been able to accomplish any of this. They were front and center in every discussion about how to get it done. And there were some lively discussions. They weren't all easy. This was not something that was like, oh, this is an easy button on that. It was not always that way. We had some real, challenging times where we were really working hard to make really difficult decisions on how best to move forward. And I always say that when you have the most difficult conversations, you come up with the best strategy, because you've got people who are fighting for their different perspectives, and you usually find something in the middle. But, I just can't say enough to the directors and their staff that really did that lift and really helped us to transition government to a virtual government, and make ways for people who need to be able to come into work to be able to do that safely and for us to be able to offer services to individuals who maybe do need to come in, but not necessarily, you know, the entire public, but by appointment. So, you know, thank you to them, and, you know, just to highlight their work.
Great, great. Well, I want to close then by saying a couple things. First of all, I want to second what you said about public safety. You know, our largest public safety agencies are police and fire. We also have detention and the sheriffs, and detention did an incredible job, has done an incredible job of keeping case rates down with their best practices there. But imagine being an EMT firefighter. You know, your job is much more difficult in a pandemic, and they're the ones on the front lines that are bringing people to the hospital, to the emergency room. And then being a police officer and responding to calls about enforcement of COVID regulations, which is not an easy job for anybody. And also, you know, needing to be social distance and all of that when you're dealing with law enforcement. And it's interesting that some agencies around the state and around the country did hazard pay for their public safety in particular. And that issue did come up in Anne Arundel County. And I was shocked when not only the leadership, but the unions and the rank and file officers and firefighters said, hazard pay, that's what we signed up for. This is a hazardous job. And they didn't ask for it. They didn't push for that. They just did their jobs. And so I'm very appreciative of that in a tight budget time, that our public safety folks stepped up. But it sounds a little bit like we're bragging about how wonderful everything is in government. And part of the reason I feel like it's worth telling the story, it's a story we should be proud of that we've done so far. We have a lot of work to go. But, you know, I'm from outside government, and as cynical as the next person about government. And but when I came into this job, I felt like, look, government is about solving problems, and it can't work if people don't trust it. And if there's anything I said that I could accomplish as a county executive, it was to restore public trust in government. And the pandemic has demanded that government step up. It's in difficult times like this that people need and appreciate government. And that's part of the reason why I thought we could just brag a little tonight and tell the story about how this happened, because it's a story of amazing public servants stepping up and serving the residents. And I know that most residents really do appreciate it. And for that, I'm thankful to all of you. So our work is not done. We will carry on. These are difficult times, and I'm just gratified that we have a really strong team of committed people to respond to whatever this pandemic throws at us. So good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pam and Kay.
Thank you. Good night.